Good evening, everyone. Today's session is on for loop, how we use for loop in Python programming, and how we basically have iterations of number of statements within Python, right? So let us understand the main concept behind for loops. So basically, what is a for loop? For loop is used for iterating over a sequence. Like suppose you have some statements, suppose you have some list, or suppose you have some tuples, dictionary, set, or a string, right? And you want to iterate a number of things in that, right? Or you want to access the elements of the list. Now how would you do this thing? Using for loop you can easily do such kind of operations on this thing. This is less like the for keyword. Yes, so for is not a user defined keyword. It's a library. It's a, you may say it's a system defined or the inbuilt keyword, that is we are calling that. You cannot have the for with capital letters because it's a case sensitive language, right? So for, again I am repeating, for is a keyword in other programming languages and works more like a iterator method as in the object oriented. So it is the same like we have in programming languages that would be working, but the syntax would be different. In C++ we write something else, in Python we write something else. The code, the syntax would be different. With a for loop we can execute a set of statements once for each item in a list, tuple, set, etc. You may have a dictionary, you may have a set, you may have a string also. So with the help of for loop you can access your number of statements, right? Now let us take an example. You want to print each fruit in a fruit list. So you have a list of items which is containing the names of the fruits. That would be your apple, banana, cherry. So one list I have defined. The list name is fruits. Fruits is equal to, now how to write a list? With square bracket. Open the square bracket. Within the double quotes you are writing some string, that means, so you are writing the first string, that is apple, then comma for next element, right, in the list. So that would be your banana, and then next element, that would be your cherry. So first you define the list, and within list you have defined the different items in the list, right? After that you use the for loop. Now how to use that? For which variable? You have used x variable, x in fruits, whatever x in fruits, whatever the value we have in x, right? And then you put colon. The colon is what? Colon is to end that this is the complete condition. Your syntax is complete, and now you want to start your iteration steps. And before that you must be finding the most important part, that is indentation. This basically tells that print statement is coming under the for loop, right? So indentation is used for maintaining the scope of the statement, whether it is coming out of the for loop, whether it is coming within the for loop. So if there is no indentation, it would be treated as a simple statement. But if you have some indentation part in that, that must be treated as a statement within the for loop, right? So this is how we have the statements in a for loop, whatever we want to print it. Now, the most important part that we have in our for loop is range, right? What do you mean by range function? Let us see. Let us understand this thing, because whenever you use for function, you may be writing some code that is related to range function also, right? You may, like with the list, you can't, you may be not using, but for simple looping part, simple iterations, specified number of times you want to execute a code, we may be using the range function, right? The range function returns a sequence of numbers starting from 0 by default and increments by 1. So by default it is starting with 0 if you are not mentioning. So here I have not mentioned anything within this condition part. Only 6. 6 is specified what is the end of that particular part, right? So here, what is the starting point by default? That is 0. And it is the, what is the unit of increments it would be taking? That is 1. But it increments by 1 by default. And set a specified number, like whatever condition you have given. Like I have given x in range 6. So it would be running from 0 to 5, right? 6 times. So this is how. And again, you may observe this thing also. You have maintained the indentation part to print this statement, right? Then we have a single program for better understanding of for loops, right? So let us see how to find out the average of numbers. So input the counter of the numbers, whatever numbers you want to enter, take it as n. Then where you are taking the summation of all the values, all the items, you would be taking as a sum variable. And then this is a type of pseudo code we have, like nothing, no language, just logic. It could be implemented through any language, so it would be treated as a pseudo code, right? So here we have the first statement that you need to have your how many numbers you want to enter. You take that number, initialize some variable which is holding the summation of all the numbers. Then how many, like start your looping part, right? Loop how many times, whatever your numbers you have given as an input, n number of times, right? And then input a number, that is x. Now you enter the values. First you start the loop. Loop means you are specifying how many times, how many numbers you want. And then you specify the value, input a number, and then add those numbers to the sum variable. So here you are storing somewhere in the sum variable. And then you calculate the average. Average means you are dividing just by calculating the summation of numbers and then divided it by total number of items. So this is how we write a pseudocode for that. Let us have a steps how we write in Python and what will be the flow chart for this, right? Now what would be the flow chart? We have defined n is equal to 5, right? Here we have defined n is equal to 5, right? And here you may observe that thing. You may be using any loop for repeating the steps. So repetitive steps can be done with the help of looping concept. You may have the for loop, you may have the while loop in your Python, right? So while loop is basically simple differences. First, write down the condition. Now initialize the variable. First of all, initialize the variable. Write down the condition. If it is greater than 0, then increment or decrement the number. So there are 3 parts in any loop, right? Starting point, condition, and units of increment. Like whether your loop is incrementing or whether your loop is decrementing. Loop or repetitive have iteration variables that change each time through a loop. You cannot have all the same values because looping is meant for one time iteration, second time iteration. It works like this. Often these iteration variables go through a sequence of numbers. Now how it works, let us see. So you have started with 5 and till when we have 0. So 0 is not included basically because it is, we have n is greater than 0. When the condition is, whenever we have the condition n greater than 0, we can execute this loop. And how many number of times it is given? That is 5. So I told you why we are using this. We are using this. First we initialize any variable. Where is the starting point? What is the condition? The condition is this: n is greater than 0. If it is true, yes, 5 is greater than 0, yes, then yes part would be like this. You are like we have done in the if else statement also. These number of statements would be executing. Now you are printing the value of n. So first time you have printed, then decrement the value of n, right, until it reaches to 0. Right, when you have 0 is greater than 0, it won't be executing, it won't be entering into this loop part, right? Then again, now this comes, this is the 5, then this comes 4. Now again 4 is greater than 0, yes, again this loop will be printed. Again 3, 2 and 1, 1 is greater than 0, yes, so 1 would be printed. Then you have 0, then it come out of the loop and it says no, now the condition is false, and then it is going to like type the print the statement, that is any statement you may give, like I have blast off. Blast off means you are coming out of, or some people write end, and then you print the value of n. Now at the end part, like now what is the value of n after completing all the iteration? It would be 0. So yes, it is written as 0. It has started with 5, right? Then 4, then 3, then 2, and then 1. Then once the condition is false, then it jumps to the next statement, that is print, right? So when your condition is false, it would be going to the next statement. And what is the block of this loop? That is maintained using indentation. Again, I am repeating, this is indentation. Now for coming out of this statement, we have the next statement, that is like here, right? Print blast off or print n, right? Okay, so this is how we repeat the steps. Now let us have a indefinite loop, right? And let us check out what is wrong in this part. Okay, so you have, in this part you have n is equal to 5. Again, n 5 is greater than 0, yes. You are moving into this part, right? And then you are printing leather and rinsing part, right? You don't have any increment or decrement part. Is it having? This loop is having like this. We have incremented or decremented the value of n. Yes, that's why this loop is executed. So we have 3 parts in any loop, right? Here we have initialization. We have this part, n is greater than 0. Where is increment or decrement? So if it is, it won't be entering into this. Why? Because we don't have the increment or decrement part, right? So this is how we have, this comes into an indefinite loop. It is going to be have like, you have to put some exit function, or you have to put some break function to come out of this loop, because you can't be like having such kind of thing when you don't have to end the infinite loop. Now tell me what this loop is doing. You have 0. 0 is greater than 0. Yes, 0 is greater than 0. It won't be entering. The condition is true or false. 0 is greater than 0. No. So this is how you, based on your conditions, you check out the looping part, whether this particular value is checked with, like 0 is greater than 0. The condition is true, no, then directly it is coming out of that loop. So this is how it works. Now when we have infinite loop, or you have some problem in looping part, or if the conditions are this, we want to come out of that loop, rather than like exiting from the keyboard or putting the keywords like control break or something like that on the keyboard. Why to use those when we have a concept of coming out of a loop? That is called break statement. Basically the break statement ends the current loop and jumps to the statement immediately following the loop. So here I have written break, right? Break means once this statement comes, it is going to have, it is going to come out of the loop. It is not going to like have the next statement. When you want to come out of the loop, it would be we will be using break statement. The break statement ends the current loop and jumps to the statement immediately following the loop. So here is the while loop, and we have this scope. The scope would be this, because indentation would be like this, and your next statement would be this one, right? So when we have break command, we are not going to jump to the next statement, that is print line. Why? Because we have used break statement. So break means coming out of the loop part. It is like a loop test that can happen anywhere in the body of the loop. So whenever you want to test the condition, whenever you want to test the looping part, you may be using the break statements. Let us see while true. While true means whenever the value is true, then what is going to happen? Line is equal to input. Now when you take an input and you will be like your value is true, you will be taking as input, and if your value is equal to the similar word, that's what I have taken, that is the string. If your input value is whatever you have in this line variable, and if this value is equal to done, the value is done, right, then you break out of this, right? Otherwise it is going to print and it is going to execute the next statement in the loop. So suppose somebody has entered hello there, or somebody has entered finished, so it is not coming under this scope. So it is going to have the last statement like this. You have the true part. If it is true, break, coming to the next statement, that is done, right? So it works like this. Basically, you have the true part, you have the false part also, because you have if statement. Now within the if statement, if the block is having the break part, so how to come out of the loop? If the condition is false, you may directly jump to the next statement. No need to execute this line, right? Break word, break is meant for coming out of the loop, right? No need to have such kind of thing, right? No need to have the next line won't be executed. So this is how, like when you have a while scope and you are putting the break statement, it is directly coming out from this loop if the condition is false. Now let us see finishing an iteration with continue. Now sometimes we may face a difficulty, we have to continue with the iterations. Like in the previous part, we need to come out, right? Sometimes we may face such a problem, we want to continue that loop rather than coming out. So for coming out, we will be using break keyword, and for executing, for finishing an iteration, we can use continue statement. So the continue statement ends the current iteration and jumps to the top of the loop and starts the next iteration right? Suppose I am having while true, right? So again you have some conditions. This is the condition and this is the scope of the while loop. This is what? This is the scope of the while loop, right? Again you have taken one input, that is hello there. Yes, hello is going to be like is equal to this thing, hello there. So if the first syntax, now this 0 means the first index of the string, If the first index of the string is hash, then you continue. Otherwise, you are going to print done, right? If the first symbol, the first index is hash, then you need to use the statement that is continue. Otherwise, what you have taken, if another syntax you have taken, if the line value, whatever is taken as an input, is equal to done, then you have used break statement. So here we have used both the things, continue statement also and break statement also, right? Now, before coming to the next part, again I am repeating, break coming out from the loop, continue, even the condition is not true. What is the main function is statement to continue the iteration, right? Jumps to the top of the loop. So basically it is going to not going to execute that part. It is going to continue the next. This is how it works. Otherwise, when we have to exit from that loop, how you are going to break from this loop? If you are using the continue statement. So what we usually do is we have our break statement in that particular program, right? So break statement is basically breaking the loop and coming out of that loop rather than iterating the process. Okay, and then you take the next statement, like after your break part. This is, now tell me, this print line, whatever the value is in line, would be printed here. So this is the line which is coming after the if, both the if statements, and then after all the things we have done part, means this print statement is not coming under this while part. Okay, we are jumping into the next statement, that is print statement. So this is how we have looping concept in our program. Okay, this is how we have looping concept in our program. Okay, so we will be using for loops, we will be using while loops, we will be using, in looping concept there are two things, we may be using break statement, we may be using continue statement, right? So most of the time we will be using break statement when we have such kind of condition. We don't want to jump to the next statement or to iterate that loop. So coming out would be like this. No need to have the next code. Even this is only single statement I have written. We may take a number of statements. Break means going out, not checking out the other conditions, right? And just moving into the next statement. This is how we have the break concept in our program, right? Whereas when we have while statement, continue statement, continue means you have some condition and you don't want to end the, basically continue statement ends the current iteration and jumps to the top of the loop. So it is going to iterate like this. It ends the current iteration and jumps to the first condition, the top of the loop, not within the this if any condition. It is basically coming out of this iteration and directly going into the this part, the starting iteration, the top of the loop, right? So these are the two keywords that we have in our programming, right? What are those two? That are break and continue. break is to come out from the loop, and continue is to continue the loop part, right? So this is, I hope you have understood how we have the different loops, what is the basic concept behind the loops, what are the different steps we have, what are the different syntax, right? So I told you there are three parts in a loop. The first is you need to have the condition part, how many types the loops is going to execute, what is the condition where it is going to stop, and what is the increment or decrement. By default it is taking 1. Like in this part, have you seen this part? We have taken it as 1. So it is written like when we are using range function, it is going to use the 1. By default it increments by 1. No need to specify it. And sometimes likely like in this we directly writing the 6. Now what is 6? 6 means from 0 it is starting, right? And till what part it is going to end? Till 6, when it reaches to 6, and the number of units. So the number of units would be 1, right? So there are three things in any loop: initialization or the starting point, the second is the ending point or the condition you may say, and how many increments, what is the unit of the increment you want in your loop, right? So by default it is 1, and by default it starts with 0 if you are not specifying. Like I have not specified anything in this, so it would be taking, it would be starting with 0, and then condition would be 6, and how many units, that is 1. This is how it is going to execute, right? So these are the number of things that we have in our looping concept. So this is the pseudo code that we have understood, and then break statement, then we have our continue statement, and then let me explain you with this also. Whenever we have the continue part, it is directly coming to the top of this part. No need to continue with the next iteration, right? It is basically starts with the first part. Again it is jumping into the top of the condition, and again it is iterating the loop. So continue means we are disregarding that part. Continue with the condition, right? Like in through using flowchart, we may see if the condition is true, it may move to this part and then continue. Continue will not go to this part. Have you seen? Have you observed? It is not going to continue with the next part. It is just focusing on the this part. This is how it works, right? So this is the flow. Basically, what is the logic behind that? Like while the condition is true, you may have some statement. Then if your condition is true, then you may continue with that part. Otherwise, if you have some other conditions like done or like this, then you may take other part and you may break out of that loop, right? Again, after this, you have to print, like if all the things are end, like your all the statements are executed, you are coming out of the loop, then the last statement would be your print and done, right? This is the statement we have, print done, right? So this is how we have the concept of loop and continue and break statements, right? You may be using for loop, you may be using while loop, but the syntax would be different, but the three parts would remain same: starting point, ending point, and your increment and decrement, right? Whether the units are incrementing or whether the units are decrementing. By default it is 1 and the loop is starting with 0. So these are the basic concepts that we have in our for loop or with our while loop, right? I hope you understood the session, the concept of looping part, I will be giving more example on looping part, like how we use this looping part in our program, right? Whether it is for loop or whether it is while loop. Okay, so I I will be discussing in more sessions, more programs, more examples. Right? I hope you like the session. Thank you.